The entrance was barely big enough to crawl through. My older brother Kai crouched down in the dried-up river bed and peered inside. I watched from up on the edge of the riverbank, anticipation building. Kai reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a flashlight and beamed light inside. This was our yearly tradition: find an unexplored cave and explore it. Not the safest hobby, but it worked for us. Either way, I just enjoyed spending time with Kai. He's the kind of guy you turn to when life turns to shit. Calm, measured, focused. He cared about people, no matter the risk. Finally, Kai looked up at me and grinned. Raising an arm, he gave a smooth thumbs up. I nodded, and made my way down the river bank, steeper than it looked. The sun moved behind the mountain summit, and shadow crept over all. It was quiet out here, in the La Salle Mountains of Utah, quiet and peaceful. Like the first day of summer back in. My foot slipped. I tumbled over backward and slammed against the hard-packed dirt. Before I knew what happened, Kai stepped over me and extended his hand. "You okay?" he said, looking down with concern. "Yeah." I took his hand, and he pulled me up. Dust plumes rose as I patted myself down. "It's about 50 feet to the chamber," said Kai, turning back towards the cave entrance. "Chamber?" "Yup." He pulled out his bright orange hard hat from the saddlebag and put it on. I did the same. This was gonna be a crawler. Stomach flat against the ground while the ceiling scraped against your back. Like army crawling under an endless sagging bed. I understand how unappealing this sounds, but to us, back then, caving was like meditation. Focus on moving forward one pull at a time. Don't think about the rock above, don't think about the fact you might get stuck. Just breathe. Breathe, and move forward. Kai went in, and I followed. After about 40 laborious minutes of crawling, we finally reached the chamber. Holy fuck. Kai's voice echoed like a gymnasium. I pushed up from the tunnel and took it all in. Holy fuck was right. The chamber looked big enough to fit a 737 inside, maybe two. Twisting pillars of rock and stalactites. We didn't say anything, we just looked at each other, and that was enough. This was incredible. We spent a good 3 hours exploring every little nook and cranny of the chamber. No more tunnels, we should head back, I said, turning for the exit. Kai shrugged and followed after. I reached the tunnel, hunched down and... "Wait," said Kai. I looked back over my shoulder. Kai's back was turned to me. He looked off into the chamber, the flashlight on his helmet cutting through pitch dark. "What?" I asked. No response. I pushed up to my feet and marched over. When I reached his side, I finally saw what he saw, tucked behind a fallen boulder, another passage. Even smaller than the main entrance. Kai stepped over and squat down. The light from his helmet beamed inside. "Ear dripper," he said. The words hit me like a bad smell. Ear dripper was a loving nickname for water-filled passages. Imagine crawling through a storm-drained tunnel with mere inches of breathing space. We call them ear drippers because your ears get filled with stagnant cave water when you turn your head to avoid getting a mouthful of stagnant cave water. "Let's come back with water gear," I said. Kai flicked his hand, swatting my idea down. "About 60 feet away," he said, "there's another chamber." He looked back up at me. That familiar grin on his face and that familiar spark in his eyes. Like Indiana Jones hunting treasure. "What if it rains?" I said. Forecasts dry for weeks. He turned back to the passage and crawled forward. I followed after. If Kai's not worried, I'm not worried. I'd follow Kai if he went to hell. Back when we were kids, one of the Balri boys pushed me into a rushing torrent. My head smashed against a rock, and I blacked out. When I woke up 5 minutes later, I was on the shoreline and Kai was pumping my chest. He jumped in after me and pulled me out. Days later, when I asked him why he risked his life to save me, he shrugged. "Beats me," he said, cracking a smile. That was Kai summed up. I could handle tight spaces. Water, on the other hand, not a fan. It always felt like something was hiding beneath the surface. Waiting for me. Like some ancient evil hid there since before time began, waiting for me to crawl by just so he could finally clamp his rotting teeth into my screaming jugular. Maybe watching The Descent while high on acid wasn't the best decision. Regardless, I crawled after him. Turning my head, I sealed my mouth shut as lukewarm cave water lapped up against my face, like slithering tongues. My helmet scraped against the pockmarked limestone above as murky water rippled below. There was only about 5 to 6 inches of space between the water and the ceiling here. We crept forward bit by bit. Both of us twisting and pulling through the ever smaller tunnel. 60 feet away, I said bitterly. 30 minutes had gone by with no chamber in sight. Give or take, said Kai, chipper as ever. I sighed and squeezed through another slippery crevice. Wait, said Kai, holding still now. I stopped moving. What? He looked back at me with questions in his face. My light reflected in his eyes. Silence. What? I said. He pulled something out of the water. Slimy and dripping, the object in his hands was about the size of a shoe. I think it's a shoe, he said, pressing his upper back against the rock wall and twisting to the side. He yanked his free arm up from the water and clawed the muck away from the object. A tedious process. But sure enough, it was a shoe. An old-timey leatherwork boot. We sat there in silence for about 5 seconds until, said Kai, and he unceremoniously dropped the shoe back into the water and pressed onward. "W8, I said, not moving. "It's a shoe," he replied, not looking back. "Yes, but maybe it's the first time somebody lost a shoe," he said, pulling through another crevice. I shook my head and followed after. Like I said before, if Kai's not worried, I'm not worried. 5 minutes of laborious crawling went by until, "Fuck," said Kai. This time I saw what he saw. A dead end. Sort of. A wall of limestone cut down into the water. Carved into the wall was a hole about the size of a dinner plate. Through the hole, on the other side, was more tunnel. "I think it runs through," said Kai, shutting his eyes, taking a deep breath, placing his hands flat up against the ceiling and, "Wait," I called out. But it was too late, he slipped beneath the water. Fuck. Now it was only me and the sound of bubbling murk. 10 long seconds went by until he finally came up on the other side. I exhaled relief. "It's not bad," said Kai, calling back through the hole. Grinning wide and squinting as my light shone into his bloodshot eyes. I looked at him, uncertainty filling my face. "It's okay, man," he said, "take your time." He looked back over his shoulder. "We're almost there, for real now." I breathed in slow. Exhaled. Breathed in again. Shut my eyes and, "Wait," said Kai. But his voice sounded different now. Worried. I peered back through the hole. The back of Kai's head, wet and dirt-stained. Flashlight beam catching the scuff marks on his bright orange hard hat. "What's up?" I said. "Are you hurt?" said Kai. But he wasn't talking to me, he was talking to somebody else. He was talking to somebody else, and now he sounded scared. Only once in my life did I ever hear Kai sound scared. Back in our childhood, Mom was in a bad car accident. I sat at the kitchen table mid-homework, while Kai talked with the hospital over the phone. "Is she gonna be okay?" asked Kai. I never forgot the way his voice shook. And now, for the first time in 16 years, I heard it again. I heard his voice shaking. "Kai, what's going on?" A long silence followed. Up ahead, he spoke in hushed tones, "Somebody's here." My stomach churned into knots. Silence. Nothing but the drip, 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 of water. "Are you hurt?" Kai asked them again. Another long silence and then, "Help me." A voice from the darkness replied. Small and weak. "Please, help me." They sounded on the verge of tears. But underneath the sadness, something else lurked. A building tone of anticipation, almost excitement. Like they were about to pull a joke on us. A horrific, unspeakable joke. "Kai." I whispered. "Are you okay?" Kai asked the stranger. More silence followed. "No," the voice replied, oddly calm now. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. "Kai, let's go," I hissed, looking back over my shoulder. Nothing but wet darkness, like a mangled throat etched in stone. We'd gone further than I thought. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever. When I turned back, Kai was gone. "Kai." Silence. Fuck. I took in a slow deep breath in. A deep rumble echoed from behind. Thunder. Fuck, fuck, fuck. I peered back through the hole, into the dark ahead. "Kai." I said, louder now. From a crack in the ceiling, a thin sheet of water ran down the walls. The surface was rising. "Rainstorm." "Kai," I yelled. Still nothing. "Kai." At least, that's what I tell myself to justify leaving him behind. It took me 2 hours of crawling, gasping for breath, and pulling myself through biting cold to finally escape. When I scrambled out of the cave, it was night. Shallow rushing torrent poured down through the once dry riverbed. The thunder had stopped, but the rain didn't. A vicious downpour, unlike anything I'd ever seen. Staggering my way back down the mountain, I finally reached Kai's four-wheel Jeep. No cell phones back then, so I drove. Pedaled to the floor all the way to the nearest gas station. I screeched to a stop in the parking lot and leapt out. Keys still in the ignition. Engine still running. I burst through the gas station front doors so loud the clerk went for his gun beneath the counter. "Phone." I wheezed, hands on knees, dripping black mud onto the white plastic floors. The clerk studied me, hands still reaching for the gun. "Phone," I screamed, eyes filled with dread. Finally, he understood. He went back, grabbed the wired telephone and handed it to me. I called the park ranger and told her where my brother went missing. She told me a team was en route. Told me to stay warm, stay safe, stay put. Exhausted, I dropped the phone and wandered back outside. I staggered through the parking lot and climbed back into my brother's Jeep. Engine still running, driver's side door still open. I sat there until the rain finally stopped. Until the sun finally crept up over the western La Salle Mountains. Until the fuel tank emptied, and the morning birds started singing. They never found Kai's body. 15 years later, and I still haven't told anyone about the voice from the darkness. Not even my wife. I know that's bad, I know I shouldn't keep secrets, but I'm not ready. Not yet. Maybe in a few years. Maybe never. I don't know why, but part of me fears that even telling people about the voice from the cave will make the stranger return. Regardless, I keep thinking about Kai's last words, "Are you okay?" Kai was everything to me, back when we were kids, after Mom passed in that car accident. Kai became father, mother, brother, friend. All that in one person. And now he was gone. I don't know who that was down in the caves. I don't want to know. It's weird, but I keep getting this feeling like I'll run into them again. Sometimes I wake up and can't get back to sleep. Sometimes it feels like the stranger from the cave is about to call out any second now, waiting in the dark. Waiting to wrap their cold, wet hands around my ankles and pull me away into nothing. Of course, it never happens. But the thought rarely goes away, like any minute, any second, they'll show up. That small voice calling out from the dark, waiting to pull me into the water. I don't think I'm ready to meet them again yet. Maybe in a few years. Maybe never. Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe it'll be far worse than I ever thought. I don't know. Nobody does. But there is one thing I do know. When the day finally comes. When the stranger from the caves finally returns. I'll ask them if they're okay.